2013, Glasgow. A young, attractive woman drives her van around the city, alone, at night, on the prowl. She pulls over and asks a man for some directions. They get talking. She finds out where he's going and offers him a lift.
No girlfriend, really?
Oh, I don't have a girlfriend at all.
You're very charming.
The two begin chatting, flirting, getting to know each other, and eventually she invites him back to her place. The man excitedly agrees and has absolutely no idea what this woman really intends to do with him.
Come to me.
Join me as we continue our journey through the mind and body, and we discuss Jonathan Glazer's Under the Skin. Welcome back to the evolution of horror. My name is Mike, and as ever, I am your host. If you're tuning in for the first time, then welcome. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the history and the evolution of the horror genre by looking at particular subgenres one series at a time. We are currently in the middle of our 6th series, exploring the mind and body in horror cinema, and this is part 29. This week, we're looking at one film and one film only, as that intro suggested, the masterpiece that is Under the Skin from 2013. This will be a spoilerific discussion. I would urge you, if you haven't seen this film, give yourself a treat. There is really nothing else like it. I am in love with this film, and I would recommend everybody check it out before listening to our discussion. Now, later on in this episode, very excitingly, I'm going to be joined by one of the actors from this movie. Adam Pearson will be here telling me about his experiences of being in this strange, bizarre masterpiece. What it was like to be a part of this film, what it was like working with Jonathan Glazer, and what it was like starring in a movie alongside Scarlett Johansson in a van in Glasgow. So stay tuned for that later on in the episode. But first of all, joining me to discuss all things Under the Skin, a regular EOH contributor. He was here only a few weeks ago, in fact, discussing serial killer movies with me. And I know he's a big fan of this particular film, so I had to get him back. It's Brad Hanson.
Hello, mate. How weird it is for me to be here and not doing an Also Rans episode.
I know. What the hell? We're changing things up this time round because I did think of you for this film because I know you're somewhat of a fan, right?
I think it's the best film of the last decade.
There you go. So more on that in a moment. We've got to do a slight kind of gear shift here because in the chronology of recording these, we've literally just finished talking about a Serbian film for Patreon. So we're going to something quite different now, which is nice.
Yes, I mean we're elevating ourselves away from the depths of depravity, but we're not that far removed.
No, there's a few thematic similarities, I reckon. So let me ask you. I mean, you've already been on this series, and we talked a lot about the sort of the psychological aspect of what we've been looking at this series, sort of serial killers and that kind of thing. Let me ask you about body horror, and we can talk about whether or not how firmly this film falls into body horror. But are you a fan of that subgenre? I guess, you know, the classics like Cronenberg, etc.
Yeah, I've always found the body horror to be quite an interesting and pervasive thought, because the idea of your body betraying you or something within your body betraying you is a constant, especially in these times. Mm-hmm. The corona times,
indeed,
where you don't quite know what's going on under the skin, and you feel almost disassociated from your body, and you don't trust anything that your body does. So if I have a little cough or a little tickle, because I'm asthmatic as well, which makes things scarier. But you know, if I feel a bit run down one day, I'm immediately like, is my body betraying me? And the idea of body horror being it's prevalent now, but it's always been a prevalent thing about you not being able to trust your own functions, or if something invades your body, you know, sickness, disease, pestilence, or whatever that shift and alter you either physically or mentally, I think is always been quite a terrifying aspect, because although the films that tackle these kind of ideas, you know, The Fly, The Thing, these kind of things, they're outlandish and sci-fi based and not within the realms of possibility, but there's always a degree of, well, maybe there's like a shadow of doubt that, you know, your body could at any point just turn around and be like, fuck you. This is happening now.
And they tap into something. Even the most like outlandish ones, even the most sci-fi ones, do tap into something real. Like The Fly could just be about having a terminal illness, right? Or you know, we again, moments like in Under the Skin where you suddenly panic and grab a lamp and look at a part of yourself and discover, oh my god, I've got something wrong or something missing or something growing or something. You know, there is like, we've all had that feeling to different extents, right, in our lives, and that sort of panic. So I think they all tap into something quite relatable in a way.
Even though the themes and subjects are often outlandish and not based in reality at all.
Yeah.
You do wake up and think, why is my arm always asleep? Like, what's going on?
Okay, we've got so much to discuss. Let's get straight into it, shall we? Let's talk about Under the Skin from 2013.
When was the last time you touched someone? You don't want to wake up, do you?
A mysterious woman seduces lonely men in the evening hours in Glasgow, Scotland. However, events lead her to begin a process of self-discovery. Let's keep it deliberately vague.
As vague as this film is. So you've alluded to it already, but tell me what you think of this film.
As I will just reiterate, just for impact's sake, it is the best film of the last decade by a country mile. Mm-hmm. If we're going 2010 to 2020, there's not a film that parallels it in terms of its scope, yet its restraint. Every single frame, every single narrative choice, every single I've got a few examples. Every single set dressing is all masterfully controlled and intentionally staged by Jonathan Glazer to create this otherworldly, ethereal, yet deeply human and grounded exploration of so many different tropes, ideas of identity, of self, that I just think it's simply one of the most remarkable films I think we've been fortunate enough to see in that. I could maybe even stretch further than the last decade, but you know, then we get into some big boy stuff then.
Of the 21st century, possibly. I don't know. I agree with you. It's up there for me as well. I think it's just, God, I love it more. I love it more and more every time I watch it. It's not just a great story. It's like an experience. I think. Like, I feel like you've got to do it properly when you watch Under the Skin as well. You got to turn out the lights. You've got to turn up that volume. Listen to that incredible soundtrack. You know, it's just overpowering experience, isn't it? I think. And what I love as well, and we'll get into, is that it tells a sort of, I don't know, a sort of, in a way, classic kind of alien sci-fi story in a completely unconventional way that doesn't really end up looking like an alien or sci-fi film, because this could easily have gone in a different series, right? Potentially the next one, because it is at its core a sci-fi film, but it doesn't really feel like that, does it? Do you know what I mean? Because correct me if I'm wrong, you're not like the biggest sort of sci-fi horror fan, are you? And yet this is one of your faves. Yeah,
exactly that, which is really going to do me a disservice when you're coming to program your guests for next season.
You know exactly where you'll be next season.
Yeah, I'm already like researching the Species sequels. What can we do?
Start on that Phantasm box set.
Exactly. But this I think very consistently hits the two structural points of this entire series, mind and body, because we have her body being a vessel, a conduit for a bigger plan, a bigger idea as to that we're never really shared narratively why, what, how, when. We're given none of that information. We're in terms of anything that goes on in this film, which I think is one of the film's strengths, but also her mind as it shifts and alters as she becomes more human, as she assimilates into the culture that she's been thrust upon. This is the perfect embodiment of mind and body.
Yeah,
in my opinion,
I agree with you. Like I couldn't. And just the mood. I think also something that has consistently come up on this series, that horror that deals with the mind and body kind of crosses over outside of straight genre film and into a sort of art house area as well, which again, this film, in some ways, you could look at this film as one of the early sort of examples of this kind of elevated horror movement that people drone on about, right? Of the 2010s, this sort of, is it strictly horror? Is it kind of art house? It's very prestigious looking. It won critics over. It won awards. It's got a big star at the center of it, but also it's a kind of classic sci-fi B movie in another way, you know, and it rides that line really cleverly in the way that a lot of films that we've explored this series do, I think. Yeah,
definitely. It's definitely one that sort of treads a lot of genre tropes and lines, but also feels very mainstream and contemporary and I would say accessible, but I think the film is deliberately very ambiguous and very cold and very alienating. Which is why it could maybe go into next season, but whatever.
Yeah, exactly, whatever. Yeah, it is though. You're right. It's beautifully ambiguous and strange and hypnotic. I remember when this film came out, I had the pleasure of interviewing the director, Jonathan Glazer, and he was so interesting. And he talked about, and I'm sure this has been written about so much by people anyway, but he talked about how he essentially stripped away the sort of heavy narrative elements of the novel and focused on this idea that the main character is an alien. So he very much deliberately made everything that we see viewed through an alien lens. You know, we're looking at the world through an alien's eyes. So, you know, just walking around a shopping centre or driving through Glasgow, things that should look super mundane, somehow in this film, through this alien lens, look otherworldly, right? Or nightmarish. It's so clever how he's managed to capture that.
Yeah, it's certainly something that when I rewatched it yesterday, I was struck by how mundane things can look preposterously weird if you're looking at it from a different perspective. There's a very throwaway shot of a young girl outside of a kebab shop with devil ears on. Mm-hmm. And I've probably seen that walking around London or existing in my life, not that exact frame, but something similar many times. But seeing it through Scarlett Johansson's eyes, which is how the film is showing it to us, everything just seems so odd. Like her being beset upon by a pack of horny, like stag or hen night women.
Yeah,
feels like a pack of gazelles, or like her running into a tribe or a gaggle of creatures that seems so odd and peculiar. But I've seen horny drunk women walking down the street loads of times.
Yeah.
But it feels so odd because of the way that the film is framing it. It makes it completely at odds and quite disarming to a certain extent.
It's so clever. I've got so much I want to ask about this. Let me start from the beginning, because the insane opening, which again is just mesmerizing. So it begins with what looks like a sort of tiny little dot, right? A little white dot in a black screen, and then that dot slowly grows bigger and bigger. And then what we see are a sort of a series of strange shapes and images, and we can't quite make out what they are yet, and they all sort of look like and resemble different things as that score is growing and growing and growing. And then eventually it sort of culminates in an eye, right? A sort of human eye. And it seems to be some sort of birthing sequence of some kind. So I guess this is a good opportunity to start off by talking about just the way this film looks, I suppose. You know, Jonathan Glazer as a director, he's really interesting, isn't he? He'd only done a couple of films, feature films before this, but he, I guess, had really made his name from being a music video director, and he did quite a lot of big iconic music videos from the 90s, stuff for Blur and Massive Attack and Radiohead. But what do you think of Jonathan Glazer's directing style and the sort of visual palette that he's sort of lent to this film?
I mean, that's unbelievable Jamiroquai erasure that you've just done there, but fine.
Oh yeah, of course, Jamiroquai. Yeah.
He did. I think he did Virtual Insanity, didn't he?
Which is probably my favourite music video of all time.
And you just straight up left it out.
I know. How dare I? I know.
So it begins quite. I mean, the obvious touch point is Kubrick. It's quite Kubrickian. Mm-hmm. It's very 2001: A Space Odyssey. In its, we're watching the conception of Scarlett Johansson. We're watching her birth. We're watching her form and become and be. And it's a dedicated almost like 5 minutes, I would say, of the film where I remember I went and saw it at the Flea Pit Cinema, the Empire, when it first came out. Like the second screen that's at a tilt.
Yeah.
You know, not the nice Baroque one that's like the screen one, like the tilted one where everything's at a fucking angle. And I as I was watching it yesterday, I was almost transported back to that kind of feeling of sitting in the dark with a load of strangers at a weird angle, watching this sequence of images of light and sound and darkness and shifting contortion and a melding and an amalgamation of this, as you say, this mesmeric Mika Levy score, which, this was her like first feature score, and rightly so, she's gone on to do massive things. Her work on Jackie, for example, I think is phenomenal. Like,
I think it's the best thing about Jackie, actually, is that score. Yeah,
it's a score.
Yeah,
but the combination of these astoundingly beautiful yet simplistic images mixed with this kind of haunting, droning score with her words and sounds muffled but becoming clearer, and as she's birthed into this world. The film itself feels like it's being born itself. The idea of the film feels like it's being born, and you're either embracing it or rejecting it from that very point.
Yeah,
because I can imagine a lot of people watching that being like, what the fuck is this? Like, nothing's happening, nothing makes any sense.
Girls, no.
Sets it all out for you and says, this is what you're in for.
Yeah, exactly. It tells you there and then whether you're going to like this or not, right? It kind of sets up the tone and it sets up the visual language, and it kind of lets you know, okay, this may not be a film that's necessarily about the sort of logical plot mechanics of a mainstream sci-fi film. I never forget the first time I saw this film. I watched it in probably my favourite screening room in London. I saw it at a press screening at Dolby in Soho Square, which is a beautiful screening room, huge screen, this amazing Dolby Atmos sound, and I was completely knocked out by it. It blew me away. Like you said, Kubrick is the perfect comparison. Also, of course, I'm going to say this, but a bit Lynchian as well. It's just that idea of putting mood and atmosphere before logic, right?
The first shot looks like the bottom of a coffee cup.
Yes,
which is
I literally thought it was a coffee cup as well. Yeah, it's so true. And I think it's deliberately, like, it takes you a while to realise what it is you're looking at. And then we get these kind of weird shots of, we get that kind of static shot of what looks like a kind of rural road at night as we see that motorcycle sort of go past. And again, it's kind of looking at our world as like an alien landscape, right? There are loads of shots like that where we're looking at Glasgow, we're looking at landscapes like it's Mars or something, I think.
Yeah, because you don't immediately know. Your eyes have just been kind of constricted in a way that where you're not quite sure what you're seeing. So that when that cuts, it comes up under the skin. And the next shot is POV shot of the motorcyclist going down the road. But for the first 10 seconds of that shot, you don't know what you're looking at.
Yeah, totally.
You can't work out. You can't even work out that you're looking at a motorcyclist going down a road because your brain has been rewired from those first 5 minutes to be like, well, what the fuck is this? And that is then a perpetual theme where you can't trust anything you're seeing.
Yeah.
Because you're seeing it all with effectively like new eyes.
The
glazer has bestowed upon you by saying, well, let's just look at things at a slightly different angle. And then when it becomes immediately clear, you're like, hang about it.
Oh, God, it's so good, isn't it? And, it's such a cliche, isn't it, to use the term pure cinema. But I really do think it applies to this film because just this is a collection of sounds and images that tell a story over dialogue even, right? It's just so pure.
Exactly. And like its palette of setting it where it's set is both a genius idea from a budgetary standpoint.
Yeah.
To ground things in such a grounded reality, but then framing it as an unknown, almost foreign land. And then to kind of put that all together into this kind of amalgamation of sound and visual experience. But it's fucking Glasgow city centre. Do you know what I mean? Like,
good.
It's so weird.
So weird. So we get this kind of birthing sequence. We get the motorcyclist. Just out of interest, what do you make of the motorcycle guy as a character? Like, who do you think in your head he is? What purpose does he serve?
He's a handler.
Yeah. So he's kind of her boss, right? Does she sort of work for him?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how I read it. I read it that he's not because he helps her because the next thing you see him do is take the woman from the pitch blackness.
Yeah.
Which what's happened there? Don't matter. We'll just move on from that.
I know, some poor woman, exactly, unconscious at the side of a road.
You could have just gone to Dorothy Perkins and got her some clothes, but no, you've got to nick him off a woman for some reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's definitely a handler of some sort. He's a facilitator, and when we get further on to the discussion, things take a shift. Is when he becomes a pursuer.
Yes.
A righter of wrong, a corrector.
Yes. When they're separated.
I also think it's no accident that he's a motorcyclist because if you look at the uniform, the visual aesthetic of a motorcyclist, all motorcycle leathers, helmet, it's quite spacey. It's quite astronaut suity.
Yeah.
Like it's no mistake that he is a biker and that he's meant to represent space astronauts. The visual look of him is something that you've seen 1,000 times down the M25, but when it's framed in this way becomes something completely different.
Yeah, again, otherworldly. So we get this incredible sequence, this birthing sequence, and now this alien played by Scarlett Johansson is kind of fully revealed. She wears these clothes that they stole from this woman, and then we see her sort of wander around Glasgow. And let me just take this opportunity to ask you about Scarlett Johansson, okay? Obviously, massive Hollywood star, even at this point. How important is it that it's somebody like Scarlett Johansson who plays this alien, How important is it that Jonathan Glazer cast an actor of this caliber, as opposed to, for example, a sort of unknown British or Scottish actress?
I think it's incredibly important that it's someone recognisable with A-list celebrity qualities, because, and this is no disservice to her, but Andrea Riseborough could play this role.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't have the same... It maybe does now because she's bigger, but if we're looking at 2013, she would be perfect for this role.
Yeah.
But the whole idea or the concept of a big A-list celebrity star in Scarlett Johansson driving around in a white transit van talking to men is such an alien concept. It's such a weird idea. Even that it works to the film. It had to be a big star. It couldn't be anyone else. It had to be someone like Scarlett Johansson. I mean, I wouldn't even want to think of recasting her if you were to say like picking like Julia Roberts or whatever.
Yeah.
No. It has to be Scarlett Johansson because she holds quite an ethereal quality, like her lips and her eyes. There's something about her. She's so visually striking, and to pick this Hollywood red carpet A-lister out from LA and just plonk her at H. Samuels in Glasgow City Centre, or the kick-out time of a football match, and just put her in a transit van. That immediately is such an alien concept. Like, it doesn't make sense. What's she doing there? That doesn't make any like narrative sense.
No, exactly. You're so right. 100% agree with you. I think it's so important that it is an actor of Scarlett Johansson's, caliber. By this point, she had already been an Avenger, and then to see her, just out and about in places like you said, H. Samuels, in amongst all of these kind of regular Brits, is just so weird. Everything about it looks alien and strange and surreal, in the way that this character feels so out of place. This alien. So it works so well, I think. And what's really interesting here as well is that obviously at this point the filmmaking has changed slightly. We've gone from those really kind of beautiful abstract images to a sort of almost verite style filming now here from this point onwards. So Jonathan Glazer used a lot of hidden cameras to film Scarlett Johansson while she was just literally walking around in public places with non-actors interacting with people. So suddenly the film has a look, right, which sort of resembles, I don't know, like a TV documentary, like a reality show or something. The quality of the film suddenly has changed, and we feel like we're in some fly on the wall documentary as we watch this alien interact with people. What do you think of just the way that the visual language sort of changes at this point in the film?
I think it once again plays to the film's strength, and the fact that a lot of the times they were filming the film walking down, through a shopping centre or whatever, quickly running behind. There was people behind chasing people to get disclaimers.
Yes,
because there's no extras, and a lot of the conversations she has in the van at the beginning are with real, genuine people that didn't even know it was her, because they'd cut her hair short and dark, and they're like, you're proper beautiful, you. Yeah, like it's. There's a kind of a cinema verite look to it. There's a truth to what we're seeing, but at the same time we're like, but it's Scarlett Johansson. Like, what's she? Yeah. What? Like, at this point, you're still like, what is going on? Like, what's the point of all this? Like, where is this going?
Yeah, where is this going? What is this story we're watching? And you're right, she's driving around in this van, she's talking to random guys. These were just non-actors, people that they approached, and then if they were happy to, they would sign a release form apparently and be in the film. There are plenty of men that she spoke to apparently that didn't make it into the film because they didn't want to appear in it. But she was driving around, and the dialogue's really interesting, right? Because it is a lot of like flirty. There's a lot of guys going, "Hey, you're gorgeous," and then her going like, "Yes, oh, do you think I'm gorgeous?" Oh, but then there's a lot of like also her, very deliberately asking about where they're heading to and who they're meeting and are they alone, right? And you suddenly start to realise that she is on the prowl. Yeah,
well, she's like, he's like, do you know where Asda is?
Yeah.
She's like, no.
There's such thick Scottish accents as well. It's like, it's amazing because you just think, I wonder how much she could even understand at some point, Scarlett Johansson,
I'm looking for the M8.
You've got to go see Alan Atway, and this has got to be pure hard to explain. Do you know what Asda is?
No.
I don't even know what you're pointing at your words. See if you just drive straight along up there.
Yes.
Right, and see the traffic lights up there? Take a right there we are.
Am I keeping you from something?
No.
Where are you going?
Along here.
For what? For work?
No, I need to go meet somebody.
Are you going to meet someone?
Aye.
Alright, thank you.
Glazer didn't have to set this in Glasgow.
Yeah.
He chose to.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why he chooses Scotland as a thing is that their dialects and their accents are at times particularly difficult to understand. And as viewers, you and I are probably two of the most English boys that could possibly be.
Home county boys.
Yeah. Hello. We could do books on tape and it would be fine. But I think that's once again a directorial choice to place that it occurred. I mean, you could do the same in Manchester or Liverpool, or anywhere with a very strong identity of dialect and of sound and culture. But he's chosen Glasgow, and that's where we find it. And it always feels like at this point she's on like training missions.
Yeah.
These are reconnaissance missions. These aren't necessarily for her to perform a strike, because you find out, one of them's, got a family or whatever, so he's out. Mm-hmm. He's not going to get picked. But then there is one guy that does fit the criteria, but she doesn't do anything with, because I think at this point she's learning the steps. Because everything she's doing at this point is, she's viewing women getting makeup put on them. She's fitting into those norms of what, assimilating into culture.
Yeah.
And then doing dry runs like a serial killer would do, or like, anyone that has got a modus operandi. They're testing and practicing and making sure that when they do it, they're good enough and they're prepared enough to do so. Yeah,
you're right. She's learning to be human, isn't she, as well? Like, I think that's what those weird sounds are that you hear at the beginning as well while she's being birthed. And I think that was actual sounds of Scarlett Johansson kind of doing vocal warm-ups, but where she's going like ba 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 and all that. It's like all of this first act of the film is her, like you say, she's training, she's practicing, she's like preparing herself for what she needs to do.
No girlfriend, really?
Oh, I don't have a girlfriend at all.
You're very charming. It's better.
Yeah, sorted.
You have a handsome face.
Aye,
Yeah.
thanks a lot, cheers.
You think I'm pretty?
Aye, you're gorgeous.
Do you?
Aye, definitely.
Good.
So eventually, after sort of doing this little like reconnaissance, this training, she's meeting different people, she's practicing conversations. Finally, she lures a guy into her van and she lures him back to her lair. But, even this guy, right, I find really interesting, like just the way that he looks in juxtaposition to an A-list star like Scarlett Johansson. He just looks like such a kind of typical schlubby British guy, right? A sort of shell suit jacket and a baseball cap and a football scarf.
Yeah, well, she says to the first gentleman that fits the criteria, she says, "Oh, you're really handsome," or "You're really good looking," and he takes his hat off.
Yes,
and he's
got his like little scruffy hair,
and like he looks at her for like a seal of approval, and you already see that even if the cameras weren't there, that would be. I mean, it's authentic. I mean, I certainly, if I got picked up by a beautiful woman like Scarlett Johansson, she was complimenting me, I would be like, "What the fuck is going on? Like, how is this happening?" Like,
and they all have that reaction, don't they? They're all like, they can't believe it either that she's complimenting them or that she wants them.
Exactly. And then the way those scenes are lensed, there's a repetitive shot that he chooses to use of like an overhead where you're seeing the seats and the dashboard and the car and then the wheel, and then you're looking out, and it's like, well, this is her cockpit, isn't it? This is her spaceship. This is her. This is the abduction, just framed in a different way.
Yeah, exactly that. It's and it perfectly blends that idea of like what we've talked about before, which is a serial killer luring somebody into a van, like Buffalo Bill style, and like an alien in a spaceship, and then we flip straight back to weird surrealism again as it's revealed for the first time what she does to these men that she picks up, and he follows her into this dark sort of dilapidated sort of building. They walk into this weird void, this black room. They take off their clothes. The guy gets completely naked. He follows her and he slowly sinks into this black goop, which then turns solid, and she kind of strolls back over it and he's gone. What do you think of that as a set piece?
I mean, it's strikingly beautiful.
Yeah.
There's something so serene and peaceful about those scenes.
There is.
But filled with such menace because... Yeah, as you say, like I was watching this with my housemate, and I was like, I've hooked up with a few women in my time, and at no point do I get fully naked while they're still clothed. Like, I can't think of a single time where like when it's time to get down to business, that I've immediately stripped off all my clothes.
I know, it's like following her up the stairs and taking off your trousers as you're walking up. It's like, it's so
like
funny.
that's not how this goes. but maybe it should. Maybe it should. I thought about the amount of times I've potentially put myself in similar peril, following a lady back to her house.
Yeah.
And ended up in treacle.
But yeah, you're right. It's and none of this is meant to feel particularly realistic, I don't think, is it? Like, once we get into this space, it's sort of abstract again, and it's sort of almost representational. I think that this guy happily doesn't seem to notice that he's in this black void and that he's sinking and that she's walking away from him and he's just, taking off all of his clothes at this point. We're into something sort of completely kind of abstract, it feels like, in these sequences.
It doesn't make any geographical sense, so you have to assume that it's to a certain degree it's metaphorical as well, and it is these black room scenes of a man plunging inside something, submerging himself. Is that what sex feels like for her, or is that what sex feels like for a man? Mm-hmm. In this film's language, is this a metaphysical, or is this a literal? Is this a representation of what happens to these men, or is this an idea of what sex is like to her?
Yeah, exactly.
An alien concept. Like, are we watching them have sex but not knowing?
Exactly. I love that. I love that, it can be any one of those things, can't it? That's the thing. It can be metaphorical. It can be taken as literal. It's all open to interpretation. And these scenes then, I mean, this is basically it, right? For the first act of the film, is this on repeat. She drives around, she chats to men, she picks people up, she lures them to her black abyss. She goes to a nightclub at one point, she's speaking to people, she goes to the beach. There is a moment where she lures her second victim back. He disappears into the gloop, and at that point we actually see what happens to the men who are submerged under the black goop, right? Because we see this sort of floating body as he looks across and sees another floating body, the first victim, who's still there, still submerged, still alive, and is sort of writhing around trying to get help. But his body is kind of withered away, right? And there is that one of the only sort of pure jump scares in the film, and it always gets me at the part when he just disappears, when his skin just becomes like an empty sack.
Well, I was trying to think out about to describe it visually or orally, like the sensation of what's portrayed, and it's almost like an implosion of a balloon.
Yes,
is how I've decided that it will be called.
Yeah,
it's almost like sucking out everything about that person for whatever reason, because at this point we still don't know the purpose.
No,
the reason for why this is happening, and spoiler alert, we won't.
We never do.
We won't,
exactly.
We won't find out.
Yeah.
But so that's up to you to add your language to it. So are they harvesting humans for scientific reasons? Are they fuel? Are they just sadists? Like, there's no reason for this, but I say that great popping scene. That's why I said that's why I use that and said I'll be popping on to talk about Under the Skin, because it's such a visceral image, but there's a beauty to it because they're kind of floating weightlessly. You can tell that these are underwater scenes, but but they don't feel underwater.
Yeah,
they're not acting underwater, but it feels like they are. And just watching that man kind of husk into a used condom, of a man, and then from there watching that red drain.
Oh,
as the bits of him, what makes him are sucked out or absorbed or filtered, or once again we don't really know, but there's the red light and you see the drain, and then it's kind of enveloped and swollen up for whatever purpose they're doing. And then we get to her third victim, which is where the film shifts.
Yeah,
somewhat.
indeed. And actually, before we move on to that, there's another key moment that I think a lot of people talk about as finding particularly disturbing, which is on a beach with a family, right, as well.
Oh fuck yeah!
Which we should mention is this is a really powerful scene. She goes, because this is the only scene that kind of takes us away from the Glasgow city in this first act, and she goes to the beach. She's sort of chatting. She's found a man that she's gonna catch. He's on his own. I think he's foreign, isn't he? And he's come to Glasgow because he sort of says, "Oh, I wanted to come here." It's sort of
he's from the Czech Republic.
There you go. And but then there is this whole scene play out involving a family and a dog, and one of them's drowning, and the dad goes out to sort of save them, and then this guy gets involved and he swims out to save them. He then sort of passes out with exhaustion on the shore of the beach. She knocks him out with a rock and sort of takes him away, and just completely ignores the fact that there is this drowning family in the sea and a toddler still left completely by himself, screaming and crying on the beach while his family are drowning. And she barely even acknowledges this, does she? And then sort of drags this other body of the man she wanted away. And we're just left with this haunting shot of like cut to later on, and it's like nighttime, and that toddler is still just screaming alone on the beach with the waves kind of crashing towards him. That's a again, by doing so little, it does so much, doesn't it, at that moment?
Yeah, so because obviously later on the handler comes to clean up the mess.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
And the mess being hiding away the tent, getting rid of all the places where the swimmer was occupying, and the toddler is collateral damage.
Yeah.
It's not essential to her and what she's doing, and neither to his directive either, of tidying up her messes, because that's something separate. That's nothing to do with what we're doing. We don't get involved with that. That kid, that toddler, might as well be an ant, which we see earlier on in the film. Like it's so that baby's life is so insignificant.
Yeah,
because it doesn't fit into their directive, their purpose,
and it really kind of emphasizes this alien vibe of her too. Like she feels nothing. Like there's no glee or joy in anything that she's doing, and there's no remorse either. It's just a sort of blankness on her, in her expression most of the time as well. But yeah, so then after all of these men and these bodies start to pile up, we get to this next one, which is a sort of turning point in the story, right? Which is this really interesting moment with this guy that she picks up, played by actor Adam Pearson. Now, the character and indeed the actor has a sort of a physical condition, right? He has a sort of facial disfigurement, I suppose.
So yeah, Adam suffers from neurofibromatosis.
Exactly, neurofibromatosis. So this character, this guy, he is walking along the side of the road, right? He's got his hood up. He clearly does not want to be bothered. And compared to all of the other guys that she picks up, he seems very reluctant, right? And he seems, because of that, kind of more vulnerable almost. But she lures him in anyway, but things go a bit differently, don't they? What do you think of this whole scene? I've been racking my brains as to... I have no issue with how and what happens at this point, but I'm still trying to work out the why. The why is it him that suddenly everything changes? Yeah. So, he also delivers two of the only gags in the entire film. Where she pulls up and he goes, "This isn't Tesco's, is it?" Makes me laugh every single time. Yeah, it's so good.
And then she's like, "What do you want to do?" He's like, "I want to go to Tesco's."
Yeah. Poor guy.
How old are you?
I'm 26.
When was the last time you had a girlfriend?
Never had one.
So don't you get lonely then? You're very nice hands. You have beautiful hands. Do you want to look at me?
This isn't Tesco's, is it?
No.
You engage in this dance with these hands, and she says, have you ever touched a woman? Have you got a girlfriend? Have you ever had a girlfriend?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, he says no. And, you know, it's a really, you know, sort of heartbreaking scene to watch, because you're like, the empathy that you feel towards him is so strong at this point, and you're almost willing her, like, please let him go. Like,
don't do this to him.
He's almost an innocent. If you're looking at men being punished for their libidos,
Mm-hmm.
which is a way that you could read this film, is a punishment of male libido.
Yeah.
And of the fetishization of women and sexual identity. Although I don't think necessarily gender politics plays too much into Glazer's hands. I think it's a consideration, but I don't think it's a central theme. I think Scarlett Johansson is almost genderless, even though she has assigned a gender for a direct purpose. But I think her as a concept or a being isn't gendered.
She's wearing a female form as a way to be as effective as possible in catching her prey, right? But on the inside, there's nothing more to her than that. Yeah.
So we then follow the same old dance into the black room.
Yeah.
Into the void, into the space, and we see him succumb to the charms that every other man that we've seen that's got this far has befallen. And then we have what I would say is the most pivotal moment of the film. This is where we get into the idea of Jacques Lacan and his idea of the mirror stage, where his reasoning was that an infant, a child of 18 months, a toddler, recognizes their individualism in the world by looking into a mirror. And this is where they can kind of imagine themselves as an autonomous ego, separate from their parents, separate from everything else, where they get their own identity and idea and sense of self. Apperception is another way of sort of looking at this. And we see her do exactly that. She looks into a mirror, and it's almost like she has a crisis of conscience, a crisis of identity, of thought and feeling. It's almost like the assimilation that she's been doing has worked too well. And all of a sudden, we're looking, effectively, we've been watching baby Johansson for the first, and at this point, we're now getting into her developing as a toddler, an infant, like kind of understanding a sense of self, of moral right and moral wrong, and of their kind of body of ideas and values that they hold. And I think this is that. It's quite on the nose. I mean, she's directly looking at a mirror. And then you know, the next thing that we see is her kind of allow him to leave the next morning. And so, like, she obviously like fishes him out of there. It's like, come on in, let's get you out of here. Like, and sends him on it. I wouldn't say merry way. But
poor guy as well then has to like wander naked through a field in Scotland in the middle of winter for God knows how long as well.
We were both, when we were watching yesterday, we were like, fuck that. Imagine how much your feet would hurt. Like, the reeds and grass he's walking on ain't nice reeds and grass. That's spiky, evil evil grass.
It is. That's some Scottish landscape right there, isn't it? He's walking across.
That's bracing. So yeah, this is the moment where her directive and her purpose and her existence, her ideals coalesce, and she becomes more human than she should.
Yeah, that's exactly right. She suddenly it's like something wakes up. Well, I really like that idea that she's gone from sort of baby alien into sort of a more of a kind of grown up state at this point. She's becoming more self-aware. So before and this is a really interesting kind of, it's a sort of midway point, and the film kind of takes a considerable shift right at this moment. And I think now is the perfect time to hear from that actor we've just been talking about, who starred in this pivotal scene, the guy who was on his way to Tesco's, played by Adam Pearson. I sat down and had a little chat to Adam Pearson about his experiences as an actor, his experiences in being in Under the Skin, and about some of the challenges that still to this day actors with disabilities have to face in terms of getting roles that are interesting in film and television. So here is my chat with the brilliant Adam Pearson. Adam Pearson, hello, and thank you for joining me.
How are you doing, good sir?
I'm all right, all things considered. How about you? How's this insane year, this last year, been for you?
It's been a weird one. Film and TV just shut down as a matter of course. I was quite fortunate where I had other strings to my bow and migrated a lot of the speaking and lecturing stuff online. So like many of us, I spend a lot of my life now on Zoom,
Yes.
talking to people, but not meeting many people. And I've forgotten what all my friends look like in 3D. That's where I'm at now.
I know. I feel your pain. I absolutely do. Let me start off by asking you a bit about what, I wanted to know, like, do you consider yourself first and foremost an actor? Because you do quite a lot of different things these days, don't you? From presenting to campaigning to journalism to, would you say, like, first and foremost, you're an actor?
I wouldn't say first and foremost, no. The reason it comes at the top of a lot of lists people read out about me is simply because it starts with the word A. And also it's quite, under the skin is quite the flex.
Yeah.
As your first acting gig, that is a hell of a gig to get. But no, I do a lot of things. So would I say I'm primarily an actor? No. But by definition, someone who has acted and has done 3 features now, I definitely have no problem putting it on the old CV.
It's brilliant. It's so cool. What an incredible first credit, Under the Skin. Amazing. Tell us a little bit about how that came to happen. How did you come to be involved and appearing in the film?
So I was working for an independent TV company. I was doing a casting gig at the time. I was the casting and researcher for the first 6 series of The Undateables.
Oh, no way.
On Channel 4. Yeah, and I was busy casting the second series. I managed to cast a lot of people from just people who I knew. Because disability is that kind of world. So I just taken a friend to lunch and convinced him that it was a great idea. And if he did it, he'd definitely get laid. And then I had an email in my inbox from a charity called Changing Faces, who are the UK's largest support charity for people with disfigurements and visual differences, etc., saying they had a film company be in touch. The casting lady, Carlin Crawford, had gotten in touch with them and said that and it was quite a cagey email. Kind of, we're looking for a male with a disfigurement to be in a film directed by Jonathan Glazer, and that's all the info I had to go on at the time. And as a business graduate, I'd written papers on Glazer's work in advertising. So I was like, I have to at least throw my hat in the ring. Worst case scenario, I wasted someone's time and had a bit of a laugh. And best case scenario, I'll probably get to at least boot camp in this process. And then the further down the line we got in the conversation, the more serious it got. And then I told a few people at work what was going on because I had to keep popping out for meetings and stuff. And then eventually one of the execs came up and went, "You know what this film is, don't you?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did some research. It's based on a book by Michelle Pfeiffer called Under the Skin. It's probably going to be like some small arty thing." And then he goes, "You know, Scarlett Johansson's attached, don't you?" And I was like, okay, it's time to start taking this way more seriously than I previously had been. Because it was partly funded by Film 4, I was like, it's going to be Olivia Colman.
Yeah.
You find, and no disrespect to Olivia Colman, but this is like 10 years ago, before the Oscar and stuff. And then on the way to the final meeting with Jonathan himself, I got hit by a black cab and broke my leg.
Oh, no way.
So the first time I met Jonathan Glazer, I was under a taxi in my pants, surrounded by paramedics, high as giraffe ass on morphine. Oh. That was my first impression.
Oh, wow. Oh my God! What an incredible thing! How surreal! I mean, it's really interesting. I read that you mentioned that you sort of hoped that the role in some way would sort of challenge that stigma around actors with disfigurements or characters in films with disfigurements. Could you tell me a little bit about that, sort of what you kind of hoped for when you sort of went into the project and into the role?
Completely. So first of all, I was like very impressed in the word go that Jonathan wanted an actual actor or person with a disfigurement to play the role, rather than relying on prosthetics. There's all this debate that rages on with It's a Sin on Channel 4 at the moment as to should gay actors be casting gay roles. It's raging on at the moment with See a Film around disability. And whilst it's not an easy debate to have, I don't think it's as black and white as people make out it is. Because on one hand, you've got people shouting, only disabled actors should play disabled roles. And on the other hand, you've got people going, acting is acting, which is a ridiculous argument, because that advocates Olivier in 1965 and all male Shakespeare plays, which existed way up until the early 30s.
Yeah.
So acting is just a completely ridiculous argument to put forth as a counter to diversity in the industry. But it was also a character that didn't have any of the tropes attached to it. Normally when you see disfigurement in film, it's either a shorthand for victim or villainy. You've either got a blonde villain or bullied child in wonder, and nothing in between. It's never incidental. It's always used as almost a shorthand to not have to write a character properly, if that makes sense. And I was quite glad it stayed away from that. And I'm not saying we should put a blanket ban on those kind of tropes. There's, we're both film lovers. We love a good trope. We love a good story. But when that's all there is, when there's no kind of counter characters and there are no disfigured good guys, or it's never done incidentally, and it's all, as I say, victim or villain. Even things like Disney, Scar, a character whose disfigurement is so inherently intrinsic to his evil nature. They've named him after it. That's the problem I've always had. And it's all about getting that balance and getting more disabled writers in the room and disabled consultants on board to sort of like not change but finesse disabled characters in films. That's what I would always advocate for. Nothing about us without us.
Yeah, do you think that have you noticed yet, because I know this conversation has been happening more over the last few years, hasn't it? Have you noticed yet any change? Do you still think we've got a very long way to go? What are your thoughts?
We've got a long way to go with regards to disability, and the arguments are, so only rapists can play rapists. And it's just like, well, no, we're talking about legally protected characteristics here. Rapists belong in prison. Yeah. They don't belong in movies, and they certainly don't belong making them, which is unfortunately where some of them might be. So that's part of that. And also, dinosaurs are extinct, so we can park that one. And should a real bear play Paddington Bear? Yes, absolutely. You can teach it to talk.
Yeah.
The counter-arguments are always somehow ridiculous and dismissive, and show that these people don't really understand the debate that we're trying to have. I had an argument with a very well-known Good Morning Britain presenter who referred to the argument around what we call cripping up as woke nonsense. And I asked, would you say to female actors who want to play female roles, or BAME actors who think they should only be playing BAME roles, is that also woke nonsense? Where do you think the line is here? Because I'll always draw out protected characteristics. That's where I think the line stops when it comes to doctors playing doctors, dinosaurs playing dinosaurs, pirates playing pirates. I think that's just playing silly buggers and being dismissive of a genuine argument about representation throughout the industry, not just on screen, but off screen as well.
It's so ridiculous, and it's so often the people like said Good Morning Britain presenter, right, who in no way is their life ever affected by any kind of discrimination, and yet they feel so angrily and passionately against it too, as well. And it's like, what are you arguing for? I'll never really understand that, people like that,
Well, he's entitled to an opinion, and we had a good chat about it, and we accidentally became friends, and so I'll always have the conversation, but very often it's a two-way you've got to listen to what other people are saying. And very often when we're debating someone who's got an opposite opinion from us in anything, we hear what they say, and then we either don't read the tone of it properly, or we reinterpret it and attach our own little caveat on the end of it that isn't actually there, and end up arguing a point that doesn't truly exist.
What about, of all people, Scarlett Johansson herself has been in the spotlight surrounding these sorts of areas, right? With her casting in movies like Ghost in the Shell, and she's sort of publicly said quite a lot, hasn't she, repeatedly. I guess, like you say, she is of the opinion that acting is acting, and that she should have the opportunity to play anyone she wants, of any race or gender or whatever. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we're all too ready to lynch the actors and blame them, when we should be setting our heights higher at the top as to who the decision makers are.
Yeah.
And I think they're the ones that need to be held to account. Ultimately, actors are just there doing their job. Scarlett Johansson's just doing her job, whether it was in Ghost in the Shell or Robin Tuck. Eddie Redmayne, the Danish girl, just doing his job. Even more recently, Maddie Zeta in music, just doing her job. And I think it's really hard to know how much accountability lies with who. And when it comes to holding people to that accountability, I'll always shoot for the top. Chat and go for the director, because that's where the buck stops.
So tell me a little bit about your experience then of what it was like filming Under the Skin. Such a strange film, and particularly these incredible scenes in that first sort of half of the movie, which kind of all changes with your character's scene, right? But this whole kind of what looks like sort of secret cameras in vans, men getting into the van and then going into that kind of dark black void, that abyss. Tell us a little bit about your experience on set and what it was like filming these scenes.
So in the vans, there are 8 purpose-built cameras to capture the interior and the exterior.
Right.
I think by the end of it, we had in the can about 120 hours of just surveillance-style footage from that van. From just her driving around and filming people. And a lot of the people she films and interacts with have got no idea that they're being filmed. You've got Jonathan and kind of hair and makeup in the back, and then a couple of runners ready to jump out the van and chase down people to get them to sign a release form. You're like, hey, funny story, you're in a film, sign here. And we'd met up a couple of times, myself, Jonathan, and Scarlett, to discuss the character and why, would you get in a van in the real world if someone pulled over and offered you a lift? And I'm very cut and dry about that. I'm like, no, that's how children go missing. Don't be ridiculous. I don't care how pretty you are, you still might kill me. And then we sort of like finessed how the interaction would go. And then when it came to the actual day of shooting, we did this. I flew out on the 12th of November, 2011 to Glasgow, because I got signed off the day before 11/11/11 by the hospital to say, yeah, you're good to walk and run around on this still not great leg, but you've done your physio and what have you. Happy days. And in the van, we've only got loose bullet points we have to hit. There's no hard script. It's all quite fluid.
Right.
And we've both got earpieces in, so Jonathan can sort of like give us a bit of direction from the back of the van. And as long as we hit those bullet points, how we got there, he sort of like left up to us with a few prods here and there. So that whole "this isn't Tesco's" line, is it? That's completely off the cuff.
So, I mean, actually, we were just saying when we were discussing the film, probably the funniest, if maybe just one funny moment in the whole film, actually, like kind of moment of levity there. So that was off the cuff, was it, from you?
Yeah, because, it was a night shoot. There comes a point where I think I was genuinely yelling at her then. Because we've been driving around all night, having a night shoot. She'd stalled the van twice. And and no one enjoys night shoots. And so I was like, this isn't Tesco's.
How surreal. And yeah, I was going to ask, actually, funnily enough, how Scarlett was driving that van. Because, driving I'm assuming a manual drive, suddenly in these little narrow Scottish roads and everything. It must have been quite an experience for her. Yeah.
Yeah, she's been practicing in Elstree car park for weeks before we went up to Scotland. It was her birthday while we were filming. And a couple of the camera guys and the soundies and the Sparks, as a joke, bought her an exact replica model of the van she's been driving around.
Brilliant.
But no, she's great to work with. She's incredibly kind, incredibly patient. Doesn't get anywhere near the amount of credit for how just funny and warm and genuine she is. And I think you have to be a certain level of kind of no nonsense to last in this industry, particularly at the level she's at. And I think that's all a lot of people see. But I think once you've worked with her and you've gotten kind of down through that facade, she's great. I have not a bad word to say about Scarlett Johansson.
Was it surreal? Like, did you have a sort of a moment of like, what the fuck is happening? I'm sat in a van with Scarlett Johansson filming right now. I mean, it must be
every moment. That was my entire inner monologue. It was just it. Remind me of that and going, don't cry, don't cry. Be tough, be tough.
And not only having a scene with her in a van, but then having, a pretty intimate scene with her, right? I mean, as the story kind of progresses with all of these men that she picks up, she brings them back to her strange little black abyss and they have to get naked, and there's this incredibly kind of strange, surreal, sensual kind of scene. Again, how frightening / exhilarating / brilliant was all of that to do? Because it must have been very strange.
It's a really weird one. If you'd have sat me down when I was in school and said, when you're 26, you'll have a conversation with another adult man as to whether or not you need an erection at that exact moment in time for creative purposes.
Yeah.
And the abyss scene is shot in two parts. So the bit where she's leading men up the stairs, that was shot in Glasgow. That's an actual location. And then the actual abyss itself is done in Elstree. Right. There's like a black marble floor, and in the corner was a tank of almost molasses with a grate on hydraulics just under the surface. And then you'd all walk forward in this tank, and they slowly lower the hydraulic grate. And the way everything was like shot and lit, it would look like you're sinking into the floor. There's no CGI in those scenes at all. And the stuff, the molasses-like substance is that thick that we all had to have diving weights around our ankles to stop us just floating on
bobbing back up. Wow.
Yeah.
That is fascinating. And, it's a really interesting scene. It's such a strange, ambiguous film anyway, right? And I think everyone has their own interpretations of what's really going on in certain scenes. Do you have an idea in your head of kind of, because your scene here is a really important, it's kind of the turning point in the story, right? This is the moment when everything kind of shifts. You're the one guy that we see get picked up who kind of survives or at least escapes that room, right? What's your interpretation of what happens at this moment to Scarlett's character?
I think it's the whole film is like a slow process of humanization. She arrives at this cold, calculated killer that leaves a baby on a beach and kills a surfer with a brick. Yeah. And then, but even when you listen to the music, the soundtrack slowly gets warmer as the film goes on. I think her character does the same thing. And I think my character is the one that just shows no real interest, isn't in it for the same. There's not that animalistic intent there that there is with the other characters. And I think she sort of cottons onto that throughout our conversation. And then when she sees like the fly trapped in the glass, when she comes down the stairs, that's the kind of eureka moment, the turning point. And she lets me go, and I run through a field in Scotland naked at 3 a.m. in November because we suffer for our art.
Oh my God. How cold was that, filming that naked in Glasgow that night? And also, something that my co-host mentioned, how painful was it for your poor bare feet walking across all those sharp, stingy bits?
The sharp, stingy bits weren't weren't the problem. That was a farmer's field that had all the cows removed from it.
Right.
But cows leave behind certain produce, and I may have trodden said produce in bare feet.
Oh no.
On like the third go, and they made me do that like 7 or 8 times, and I have a theory. I can't prove it, but it's a theory nonetheless that they had it in the can take 1, and the other 7 were just getting me back for breaking my leg and missing my flight the first time at the start of the whole run.
It's amazing. It's an incredibly brave performance, and in such a brave film, really. And I guess the one thing you could kind of guarantee as you were making it, that you kind of felt like you must have been in fairly legit, safe hands, right? With a director like Jonathan Glazer and an actor like Scarlett Johansson, you know that you weren't really being played, right? In signing up for a role like this.
Yeah. Absolutely, because since you get a lot of emails from directors and students saying, "Hi, I'm working on this project. Are you interested?" And you've got to play it all by ear now.
Yeah.
Because for every good crack of the whip someone sends you get like an awful lot of bad things that you've got to turn down because they play to those tropes that I was mentioning earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just either there to tick a box or to be used as almost the butt of some joke that they don't think I'm in on. And also, you don't want to kind of undo all the good you've done in something like Under the Skin by then taking bad roles. It's a quality game now at this stage.
Yeah. Absolutely. How did you find the film the first time you saw it, fit in its finished form? I mean, what were your thoughts, just as a fan, as an audience member? What did you think of Under the Skin?
I saw it at London Film Festival.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it when the public first saw it.
Yeah.
And it was the big Odeon in Leicester Square, and Jonathan was there, Jim Wilson was there, a lot of the crew there. Scarlett couldn't make it on, unfortunately. And I'd gotten my ticket, and I took my best friend Roxy with me. And I didn't tell her I was naked in it. I thought I'd let that be a surprise.
What a lovely little surprise for her.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, see that? That's your best friend. God damn it. And just the ambience in the room, because Mika Levy, the composer, is just a genius when it comes to musicality, because from the word go, that soundtrack just grabs you by the spine and does not let go for the entire run of the film.
Are you a fan of the horror genre in general? Are you a fan of scary movies?
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Oh, I like the old stuff.
Oh, nice. What are some of your favourites?
Freaks. Todd Browning is
good choice. Well, we actually discussed Freaks earlier on in this series, and it's just such a weird, sort of fascinating little product of its time, isn't it?
Well, because it's like 1932, so it's pre-code.
Yeah.
What we call editorial policy, they call code.
Yeah.
in the States, and it's kind of say what you want about it. It hired disabled actors.
Yeah.
Like equal opportunity employer. All the way.
Yeah.
Got utterly butchered by the studio. Like there's 30 minutes of that film that is just on the cutting room floor. And so the mythos of what could have been versus what actually came out are two very, very different things. But historically, it's a fascinating film. And visually, it just looks so good. It's so clever.
It really does. It's so good. Yeah, I loved it too. What's your favourite horror film? Do you have a favourite?
Oh, that's a really, really tricky one, because then you've got to look at how you define horror films, because things like The Elephant Man, David Lynch, that walks that really fine line between horror and drama.
Yeah.
Quite nicely. There's the aforementioned Freaks. Then you've got the Nightmare on Elm Street stuff.
Yeah.
Then you've got the sort of like Playhouse films that have got that really dark McFarlane edge to them. That I watched Candyman by mistake when I was 8, because I just watched Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and I thought Candyman, based on the name alone, would be a very similar film, and I learned quite quickly it's nothing like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
That is a very scary film, Candyman. Yeah,
Candyman's terrifying,
Yeah.
and then you've got films like The Exorcist that have got such mythos to them.
yeah.
But I'm gonna give you an answer now because I've been talking around. I really like the Japanese Ringu films.
Oh yeah, incredible. Good choice. Good choice. Again, like truly frightening, weird film in that it has that same sort of atmosphere as Under the Skin, where you don't really quite know what you're watching and where it's going. You know?
No, completely. And the American version is just pale in comparison.
Yeah.
And in a close second, simply because it is utterly, like, almost panic attack inducingly terrifying. Just, if you haven't seen this film I'm about to say, just turn the lights off, draw the curtain, just sit in the dark and watch Insidious.
Oh, Insidious. It's got some of the best jump scares, doesn't it? It really does. Like, very creepy. Great choices, Adam. Absolutely great choices. Thank you so much for joining me, Adam. And I know it's such a strange time at the moment for people in your profession, but I was going to ask you, is there anything that you've got coming up, any projects in the pipeline, anything that anyone should look out for in the future?
As always, you sign paperwork when you work in this industry, so I'm very restricted on what I can and can't say. But I do have stuff in the pipeline, absolutely, both in the world of film and in the world of documentary.
Amazing. Very excited to see it. Adam Pearson, thank you so much for joining me.
No problem.
Most people are so ungrateful to be alive. But not you. Not anymore. Game over.
Hello, everybody. That was a little clip you just heard there from, well, I'm sure if you're horror fans, you're all going to know what that just was. That was, of course, James Wan and Lee Whannell's Saw from 2004. That is a little preview of what we've got going on Patreon right now. We have kicked off our brand new mini-season in which we are going to go through every single Saw movie in the series in detail. So it's going to be a little mini-series that's going to work as a retrospective for the whole franchise. Part 1, which is a sort of introduction in which me and my co-host Rob Watts talk about the series as a whole, and we also talk about our thoughts on the original Saw, is out now and is available for $10 patrons. So if you sign up to our Patreon at a $10 level or more, you will get access to our brand new Saw mini-series as well as a whole bunch of other exclusive mini-seasons. For example, you can also now listen to the whole of our Extreme mini-season. The final chapter of that went out this week, in which me, Brad Hanson, and Zobo with a shotgun discussed none other than a Serbian film. You can also listen to our brand new Hitchcock mini-season, which has just kicked off a few weeks ago, and you can still hear the whole of our Twin Peaks retrospective, which ran throughout last year. So there's so much good stuff to listen to. If you want to subscribe at a slightly lower level at $5, you can still get regular bonus episodes, including mailbag episodes, new release discussions, and any other random films that we may decide to chuck in at some point. For example, there may be a little Valentine's Day special coming in a couple of weeks' time, so keep an eye out for that if you're a $5 donor. And if you can afford to do so, you can, if you want, sign up at a $20 level, which gives you access to absolutely everything, every single bonus treat, and you also become an official Evolution of Horror sponsor, which means you'll get your own little segment dedicated to you on a future episode, and you'll get a little video message from me as a thank you. So to get involved and sign up to any one of these tiers, you can head over to patreon.com/evolution of horror. That's patreon.com/evolution of horror. If you sign up, you'll also be sent an Evolution of Horror sticker if you're UK based, and everybody who signs up, no matter where they're from or what what tier they sign up to will get a very special shout out on the podcast as a thank you. Speaking of, I'm going to give everybody who's signed up in the last couple of weeks a very special thanks. So a big thank you to N. Rahman, Christiane, Natalie Ridgeton, Lauren Nee, Jamie Hover, Morgan Baldinelli, India Miller, Ryan Tassato, Bally Greer, Pamela Hollingsworth, Carl Jenkins, Jeff Jones, Alex Dealey, Niles Harpeth, Robin Furs, Gabs Pickering, Alexis Donnelly, Ethan Lamirand, Nicholas Duboc Duval, and Catherine Gear. A huge thank you to all of those people for signing up in the last couple of weeks. And one more time, if you want to join them and get bonus content and a whole bunch of other exclusive treats, then sign up now. Patreon.com/evolution of horror. That's patreon.com/evolution of horror. Okay, let's return to the second half of my discussion with Brad Hanson as we discuss the rest of Jonathan Glazer's incredible Under the Skin. So the second half of the film, Brad, goes in a very different direction, doesn't it? So we've had this moment right in the middle where this guy, played by Adam Pearson, manages to escape, or she lets him go. She has a sort of moment of realization of what she's doing. And at this point, something in her starts to change. And from this point onwards, she stops capturing men. The tone and the vibe of the film kind of shifts as we then watch her sort of wander off by herself. She's separated from her handler, who has lost her, and she sort of ends up getting lost by herself in Scotland. She wanders cold and on her own onto a bus, and this man approaches her and sort of says, "Are you okay? Can I help you?" And he invites her back to his house, and then the film kind of becomes a weird sort of fish out of water romance film or something.
Romantic comedy, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's so weird. And it's like, as if it wasn't weird enough watching Scarlett Johansson sort of wander around in boots and stuff in the first half of the film. But now we're seeing her sat in a living room watching Tommy Cooper. And it's like, what the fuck is happening?
With beans on toast on her lap. It's like, what the fuck is happening?
It's so weird. This whole scenario, again, feels alien and strange and out of place. What do you think of just the way in which the film shifts and changes at this point?
I think you could look at it as a way of her kind of assimilation going too far, to the point where it gets to almost patriarchal domesticity. She almost falls into the trap of marriage for a certain degree. She's almost married to this man because he's warm and kind and gentle and safe and a provider, and he protects her. And if you look at the kind of, the patriarchal norms of what that would be, she almost falls into a trap of like a relationship trap and goes with someone that she probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
As we later find out. But I think it's entirely deliberate that the comedian they're watching is Tommy Cooper, because he's doing a bit where he's talking effectively gibberish.
Yeah.
He's like talking into a fishbowl.
Yeah.
And like, I was like, I don't even fucking know what's going on. I'm English. Like, I don't even know what the joke is here.
Yeah, exactly.
So for her, kind of still learning, but now with a conscience and an understanding of self, I still find these moments oddly beautiful. Like how drab and like Loachian.
It's so Loachian. It is. Loachian. Suddenly in Loach or Wheatley or something like that. It reminds me a bit of Sightseers, when he like drags her around those sort of like castles and takes her. And you're right. It's like she's suddenly trapped in this kind of marriage or something, as they go off sightseeing together and things like that. It's such a weird thing. But then, of course, this all culminates in this very strange sex scene. What did you think of this scene in the bedroom where there is a sudden some sort of revelation, right, about her and her body?
So before the sex scene occurs, she's naked in front of the mirror.
That's right.
Which the first time I saw this, I was like, cinema.
Oh yeah, I know.
Cinema.
Again, it's a brave thing for, Black Widow from the Avengers to suddenly go off and do this, right? It's pretty cool.
Yeah, but I would also say that the way that she is lensed throughout this film, but specifically in this scene, is not through a male gaze. Mm-hmm, it's not designed to titillate. It's not formatted to look a certain way. It's more, it feels more medical.
Yeah.
And there's also an interesting cinematic parable here, because he also puts on a space heater.
Yes.
Do you remember?
Yes.
Do you remember what that exactly looks like?
No.
The red drain.
Oh, nice.
Because it's a single red bar of a space heater or whatever. And I was watching it. I never picked up on it the first 2 times I watched it, but I was like, that looks exactly like the red drain that sucks all the men's gloopy bits out.
There you
after
go.
They get fucking condomed. And so I think at this point she's looking at, if we're to look at the black room, as we'll call it, as a metaphor for sex, or for her, for what she does, she's almost going through the same transition here, or the same sequence, but fish out of water in completely unfamiliar surroundings. You've even got the red drain there as like a reminder of like what happens and what bees, and then obviously that leads to what we might or might not be seeing in the black room, which is the acts of sex.
Yeah.
But we're seeing it from the actual standpoint of what he is. And the guy, bless him, he's got no fucking fuck game. I'll give him that. He keeps his wool sweater on, but goes completely bottomless.
I love
like
that. I know.
Like a toddler at the beach.
It's so funny, isn't it? Yeah, it is true. It's like, it's almost, again, like so strange and awkward and unsexy, and drab. Again, it's that sort of drabness that this whole chunk of the film has, which is, I love it. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's that is what I imagine sex is like when you've been married for like 10 years.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Like, I'm going to keep the jumper on, babe, because we haven't put the heating on.
Yeah, it's cold.
You know?
Exactly, yeah.
We've got to save a bit of money, haven't we? If we want to go to Barbados, we've got to fucking...
But then
sacrifices have got to be made.
They start to have sex, or maybe they don't quite get to that point, but they're about to have sex, or they are having sex. It's never completely clear. But then they stop, right? She stops it and sort of grabs a lamp and examines herself and sees something or doesn't see something. What do you make of this?
Right. So I watched this with my housemate, and we had 2 very, very different readings of this.
Interesting.
So his reading was that he tears her skin when he goes to penetrate her.
In the way that like it does in the final moment of the film, sort of.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he reads it as that, as almost like she almost gives the game away.
Yeah.
Because of the way she's been lulled in, which obviously contravenes certain other thoughts and feelings I have about the black room and what the black room represents and what it could represent. My understanding is, or my reading of it is, that I think she gets wet.
Oh, interesting. Right. Because this is sort of the first time that she's actually sort of wanting sex.
Potentially.
Or that she's actually feeling aroused herself, as opposed to just doing it out of duty or whatever.
Yeah, to me, the way that I read it is almost like she has a sexual desire herself.
Yeah.
For the first time, for whatever reason. Because this is not a particularly sexy scene in any regard, but to me, it's almost like, you know, the rumblings and feelings of arousal. Almost jump starting her being like, what the fuck is this? Because in her head it's always been so clinical and cold and calculated in the black room, and now we're in a different circumstance. We don't know at this point in the film, we don't even know that there's something under the skin, literally.
Yeah.
But my reading is that she's almost taken aback by the physical changes that occur downstairs when she's turned on. That's my reading of it. And as I say, my mate's is completely different, but
that is really interesting.
What's yours?
Well, I remember when I first saw it, I took it on a super literal level that she hadn't had sex up until this point because the men were disappearing into actual goop, and that maybe she didn't have a vagina down there. Like, I thought that maybe he went to have sex with her, couldn't, stopped, and she looked down and saw that there was nothing there. But
Barbie.
Yeah, exactly. But who knows? I mean, I love all of those theories, actually. That's really interesting. So that is a fascinating moment. And then we're sort of into the final act of the film, which is when it kind of transforms again and becomes a little bit more of your classic kind of woman becoming victim horror movie, I suppose, in the woods, right? Where we've got her, again, finds herself by herself, wandering in this freezing cold forest, trying to find somewhere to shelter. She runs into this creepy man in high vis who's sort of a very interesting, right, mirror of the original sort of scenes where he is prowling and he asks her, "Oh, are you with anyone? Oh, you're alone. Oh, okay." They have that same sort of conversation, but the other way around.
Plenty of trails around here. Have you been here before? No, first time? Yeah. Oh, you won't get lost. They're all clearly marked, but there's about 2,000 acres of forest here, so you should have plenty of places to go and that. You on your own?
Yeah.
Yeah, on your own? Oh, it's a nice place if you want some solitude, you know, to gather your thoughts and all that. Yeah, so enjoy yourself anyway, okay?
Then, obviously, she goes into this little, I don't know what that thing is. It's like a little outhouse.
It's a lodging
building.
hut, I think, for wanderers and meanderers, or whatever you want to call them.
That's it.
So they're put up there for like shelter and refuge.
Right.
So
she goes into one of those little lodges and just like lies down to take a nap. Obviously, at this point, he follows her in, attacks her. She escapes. There's a chase. There's a pursuit, and this is where there's a really kind of disturbing attack as he tries to rape her, and then her skin literally comes off. What do you think of this whole sequence, this whole encounter with the rapist in the woods and everything?
Throughout the entirety of this film, she has been an apex predator.
Yeah.
The idea is that if we take gender out of the equation, she is an apex predator. But if we look at gender and look at historically in cinema, up until modern day, although things are shifting, it has always been that men are predatory and women are the victims. Now, I'm not saying that as a whole. I'm not saying that is the world, but in cinema, for the most part, that is how things go.
Yeah.
And what I find so refreshing about this film is she is absolutely 100% a predator, efficient, cold, calculated, and I find that gender reversal of like preying on sort of these kind of like sexually voracious men quite fun and interesting. And what I find interesting is that when she starts to show humanity, care, consideration, thought, that she almost becomes weaker for doing so. Which allows this circumstance to happen. It's almost like when she gets more in touch with humanity itself corrupts her.
Yeah. She's the way she's framed and the way she behaves in that whole final act, she's so much more vulnerable, right? She no longer looks like this powerful alien that's going to get you. She's like lying down, cradling herself in the rain and everything else. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
But so she's almost corrupted and then abused by what it is to be human.
What it is to be a woman that looks like her on her own in the middle of the woods. It's really clever, and it's a really, again, it's one of the much more upsetting scenes in the way it's framed and shot, I think, too, because again, we're with the preying on the men, it's so over stylized and so beautiful and, like you said, kind of peaceful in a way. You're not really led to kind of feel scared or even feel sorry for those men, whereas at this point I think it feels much more like you're watching some horrible 70s film about a woman getting assaulted in the woods, right?
And the woods themselves are so unlike any other woods I've seen.
Yeah.
And I once again think this is intentional from him, because he's making everything look otherworldly, and these trees are long and spindly, but with very short, sharp branches constantly throughout peppered, and they're such distinct and unique trees in the way that it makes it look once again like other planetary, like a different realm. And the assault obviously occurs, and she's fortunate enough to get away, but not before it's revealed that there is something very literal under the skin. And you see, a black, almost facsimile of her, because I mean the face of the alien still looks like her. As she kind of looks at herself as she's peeled away the layers, but there seems to be some cognitive recognition in the skin itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's scenes where the face of Scarlett Johansson is looking at the alien, and there seems to be a
there's movement. Yeah,
there's a recognition. There's an idea between them, like a shared truth that they're looking at. Like, this is coming to an end. This is what it is. And as all good men would do, once you see a black alien, you immediately obviously set it on fire.
Yeah, fucking hell, that's terrifying as well. That he goes straight off, and that's the first thing he does, and he's back with his gas can straight away, with his petrol can, and it is it's a really disturbing moment, because you do feel kind of, you feel devastated for her at this moment, even though she is literally an alien now by this point. But and again, beautiful, creepy, haunting image as she runs on fire into that sort of snowy field and collapses, and you're left with that sort of final shot of the snow just coming down on her face again, like seeing exactly her point of view, I guess, as she dies.
Yeah, well, you see her transcend back up above, like to where she's come from, but at the same time, the handler is standing on a cliff face, a snowy cliff face, observing this occur. And once again, that looks extremely otherworldly. That doesn't look like that looks like a tundra planet from
it does,
miles and miles away. And I absolutely adore that as you say, that final shot of her kind of streaming through the forest on fire, and then it pulls back to a far removed, as you watch the body walk and then collapse, and then we meet it and we rise up with her, and then that is the end of the film itself. But it leaves you, as throughout the whole film, with more questions than answers. Like, it's not prepared. We've learned nothing.
No.
In this entire film, we've felt and experienced a lot.
Yeah, we've literally. It is one of the best Alien films, because it feels so alien in its execution. What a film! What a film!
And I mean, there are so many different other themes that we haven't touched on that it could be. I mean, this could be an entirely from an immigration standpoint. Like his house, obviously that me and you love so much, and I think everyone does if you've got eyes. The kind of looking at her as an immigrant, kind of indoctrinating herself into a culture that doesn't make sense to her, and that culture enveloping her, irrevocably changing her, and then chewing her up and spitting her out and saying, "But we don't want you."
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I love about this film, is it's so metatextual and so didactic in its approach that it can mean whatever you want to bring to it. Because it has such a loose narrative structure, and it has such a loose moral compass that whatever you choose it to be, it can be, because it fits into any mold.
Yeah, 100% agree. It can be so many things. You could. I mean, I was trying to think of because I think when I first went to see it, I knew it was about an alien, and you can read a one-line plot synopsis and know that it's about this alien harvesting, capturing men. If you didn't even know that, would you even know that she was some sort of alien? I don't know. I don't know whether, what if you went into this with absolutely no prior knowledge of what you were seeing. I wonder what you would make of it as a story, It's
the kind of thing I want to show my dad.
Yeah.
And not tell him a single thing, and just see, and be like, what do you think of that?
Yeah, what did you make of it? It upsets me when people don't like it, and a lot of people don't like it though as well. I've heard a few people say it's boring, it's stupid, it doesn't make any sense. I guess it's like so many of the best films, it is divisive as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's for everyone. I think if you're looking for a story, you ain't getting one.
Yeah,
I can't tell you anything about it. I don't other than what we've presented to you. I can't tell you what it's about.
Yeah,
because it could be about so many things, and that's what I think is so beautiful about it. But I know we mentioned it at the beginning, but just to reiterate, the Mika Levy score as well, I think, does so much towards this film, and also there are moments, though, very carefully chosen when it chooses not to have a score and when it's actually very quiet as well. But that score, there's nothing like wandering around London, pretending you're an alien and listening to that in your headphones. Just listening to that. Da, da, da. What I love about the score is it mixes. There's a lot of tribal tribalism blends to it. But then what she does is she takes 4 or 5 notes that you would say are synonymous with 50s B-movie and sci-fi.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Those kind of note tonations, and ingratiates them almost like Scarlett Johansson's doing in the film. Kind of weaves them into this kind of almost primitive, tribal-y kind of woozy atmosphere, so that it always feels like it's a touch point back to like Plan 9 from Outer Space, like because you could hear the tonations of classic sci-fi and even contemporary sci-fi in these tracks that she's made, but mixed with this kind of dreamy, kind of woozy,
boom, it's
bizarre. But it works
so good.
Perfectly. Perfect.
So good. So there you go. That's Under the Skin. And I mean, we're not alone in celebrating it too. I mean, I think it was, critics absolutely fell over themselves for it. It was a box office failure though. It didn't really gross any amount of money when it first was released. But it's going to be one of those films, isn't it, that people will forever talk about and recommend to each other, I think. And it certainly won the critics over.
I mean, Jonathan Glazer is one of the only directors that I think has made three films and made 3 masterpieces. Like he's like Sexy Beast and Birth are phenomenal as well. Like he's he's obviously got a film about Auschwitz coming out. That's going to be something.
He made that weird little short last year as well, didn't he? With the dancing that was like it was like 3 minutes long or something, which was also fun. But yeah, it's I'm happy to watch anything he throws at me. And he's not exactly a prolific filmmaker, is he? He's done 3 feature films so far, but also different from each other as well. Also different.
Yeah, one's an East End gangster movie, or like a Cockney gangster movie. One's a like Polanski-esque, like weird kid movie, but like not weird kid, odd. Yeah, and then this. Obviously, I would also be remiss if I didn't do some also rans.
Oh, please do.
That I think pair well with Under the Skin.
Go on, give us some wine pairings.
My wine pairings for this would be obviously Species.
Oh, yeah. Lovely.
I would also say Trouble Every Day.
Yeah, 100% Trouble Every Day. Yeah.
I'd also say Spring by Benson and Moorhead.
Oh, yeah, interesting. Yeah, nice.
And I'd also say A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night.
Yes. Good choices. I mean, I would recommend literally all of those films.
And I think theme-wise, they all kind of touch upon what we're talking about here. Obviously, they're all presented in very different ways, although a couple of them are kind of vampirism-based, succubus-based, succubi-based.
Yeah.
But I think that those... I would, if I was doing a movie marathon of this, like around Under the Skin, these would be the films I would put around it.
Yeah, Trouble Every Day, especially. I mean, like mood-wise and tone-wise, I feel like that would fit really well with it, wouldn't it? Although it would be a pretty bleak pairing at the same time. But yeah,
I'm not here to make you happy. I'm just here to make you watch films.
I love it. Well, there you go, Brad. Thank you so much for this. What a joy! It's been lovely to actually get to sit and chew over a whole film in depth together,
rather than being like, right, that was The Bone Collector. Moving on.
Moving on. Next one.
Denzel Washington. There we go.
But yeah, you'll be back to join me next series, and it probably will be something similar to that. But we'll see.
I'll be back doing my usual shtick, but that's
Species
fine.
2, and then amazing. But until then, tell us where we can find you and more of your stuff out there online.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at @HadBranson, and you can find me and follow me on Letterboxd for some wonderfully bad takes at SplatterPatter.
Love it, Brad. Thank you very much.
Cheers, mate.
And that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and a huge thank you to this week's 2 brilliant guests. Brad Hanson, friend of the pod, who was an absolute joy to sit and discuss this movie in depth with, and of course actor and one of the stars of Under the Skin, Adam Pearson. Such a treat to get to sit and chat to him about this movie as well. So now I would love to hear from you guys. What do you think of Under the Skin? Do you love it as much as Brad and I do, or do you think it's a bit overrated? Please get in touch touch. The email address is evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. If you want to discuss this week's movie with fellow listeners, then join the discussion group. That's the Evolution of Horror discussion group, and that can be found on Facebook. You can find all previous seasons and episodes of this podcast on our website. Head on over to evolutionofhorror.com. You can find this podcast on all major podcast platforms, and if you get a chance, if you get a spare minute, we would be hugely grateful if you could leave us a little rating or review on Apple Podcasts, which really helps us get discovered by new listeners. Okay, on to next week then, part 30. We're nearly there, we're nearly at the end. We've reached what you might call a climax. Next week, I'm going to be joined by longtime friend of the pod, Anna Bugutskaya. Yep, she's back, and she's joining me to discuss more dance horror. We are going to be talking about one film and one film only, none other than Gaspar Noé's Climax from 2018. Get your sangria at the ready and prepare to dance. Join us next week for all of this and more on the Evolution of Horror.